Good afternoon, Calvary Chapel Hurricane. Pastor Cameron here, and I'm so excited to be starting in 2026. Be starting just a Friday devotional, and we're just going to walk through. We're going to start off with the book of Hosea, and I've really titled this theme "Seeing the Heart of God Through the Book of Hosea." And so today we're going to start, and it's intended to be launched on Fridays as we get into the weekend, and just 10 to 12 minute, maybe a little bit shorter, just devotional, as I just desire to see the heart of God through Scripture. And I invite you to journey with me along, to go with me along this journey. And so we're going to start today, and this is going to be day one, Hosea 1:1, and I've titled this "The Long Haul." And so let's read this today. Hosea 1:1 says, "The word of the Lord came to Hosea, the son of Beeri, in the days of Uzziah, Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah, kings of Judah, and in the days of Jeroboam, the son of Joash, king of Israel." And so that's where we're going to stop today. And you might be wondering, well, what does that do for us? How can that help us out? What does that mean for us? And so if you noticed something, is that the ministry of Hosea, this prophet that the Lord called to, raised up to call his people back, that his ministry spanned through the lives of multiple kings of Israel, kings of Judah. We see there that the days of Uzziah, Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah. And so this came close to about a 40-year span of ministry. And not only is the length of this ministry impressive, but the state of affairs and circumstances with which Hosea ministered in is also impressive. It's worthy to know. I mean, what do we know about the spiritual climate that he ministered in? I mean, if it's anything like today, it could be hard. In fact, it was probably a little bit worse. But it can be hard to minister faithfully when there's so much pressure on you, pressure to conform, pressure to, this person doesn't like it, the way you do something, or whatever it is. It can be hard to just be faithful through 40 years or so of ministry. So the interesting thing, though, is that the spiritual climate that Hosea ministered in really changed depending on who's in authority. Uzziah, if you look at his reign as king, 2 Chronicles 26, 3 through 5, is that he did what was right in the eyes of the Lord. Jotham did what was right in the eyes of the Lord, but the people acted corruptly. Now here's the thing, Ahaz did not do what was right in the eyes of the Lord. He followed in the ways of the kings of Israel. And he brought idol worship into the temple. Hezekiah, Ahaz's son, did walk righteously before the Lord, 2 Chronicles 29, verses 1 through 2. But we also know that the kings of Israel, none of them walked upright before the Lord. They were all going after their own things and different idols. And so in the middle of this spiritual fluctuation, if you will, the nation of Judah and the spiritual adultery of Israel, Hosea was called by the Lord to be his mouthpiece and reveal his heart to the land, specifically Israel. He was called to minister for a long time. And we sometimes read through the books, minor prophets like this, or, Genesis, or any book that you're reading through, and we can read through and be like, oh, well, that happened in about a week. That happened in a couple years. It was only a short time, but reality is that Hosea had to hold on to. He had to minister for a long time in less than ideal conditions. And we often want to call it quits, don't we? When we don't see results in a short time. When the road gets bumpy or tough. Even, just think about this for a second, that Hosea, and we'll get into this as we get into the book, but he had to live with an adulterous wife. He had to have children with her. He even had to buy her back from slavery. Talk about a bumpy road. But the Lord had a plan, and he called Hosea to be faithful to the call that was on his life, despite the difficulty and the length of that difficulty. So what does it look like, friends, for you to remain walking the path the Lord has put before you, even when life gets tough? I think of Moses, 40 years of prep time. He spent time growing up in Egypt. He knew the ways of Egypt. Then the Lord calls him. He goes out to Midian, that area, and he spends 40 years in the desert being a shepherd. 40 years of prep time, 40 years of ministry. I think of Joseph, 13 years, I believe, that he was being prepared for that time when when the Lord would raise him up to be the second in command of Egypt during that time. Abraham, 25 years from when he got the promise of the deliverer, the Messiah, his son, to when that promise was fulfilled. 25 years. Man, so what does it look like for you to remain walking the path the Lord has put before you, even when life gets tough? I think of this, and I'm sure you've heard it too. I've heard it. And I just ask you this question: why do you think that the Christianity is likened to a race, an endurance race, if you will, over a sprint? There's got to be a reason. So that was the text. That's what we looked at. But I want to take a moment and just say, thinking deeper. I want to say, what does this look like for us? And I'd invite you, if you're watching or if you are listening, to go through and read through 1 Timothy chapter 1 and contemplate why Paul encouraged Timothy to remain, and that's the word, especially in the NKJV, is to remain in Ephesus despite the difficulty of pastoring in Ephesus. Paul's counsel to Timothy is, Timothy, remain there. There's still work for you to do. There's still stuff that that needs to happen within that church, so remain. So I've got a couple discussion questions for you, and I'll read them out for you. If you just think about these things, is why do you think God chose to anchor Hosea's ministry within the reigns of multiple kings rather than just one? Just an interesting thought. Why did it have to span over multiple reigns instead of just one? How might the length of Hosea's ministry have tested his faith, obedience, and perseverance? That's a big one. What dangers arise when we expect quick results in our walk with the Lord? And then the last question, why do you think God often allows long seasons of waiting or difficulty before accomplishing his purpose? Let me just journal through this a little bit today. Why do you think this is happening? And so I encourage you to remain steadfast, friends. Remain in it for the long haul, no matter what that call is on your life, whether it's just being a faithful husband, a faithful wife, raising your children in the ways of the Lord, whether it's pastoring, whether it's youth work, whether it's cleaning the church, whether it's just speaking to people and praying for people, whatever the Lord has called you to do, remain in it for the long haul. Remain faithful. You will be blessed. God bless you guys. I'll catch you next Friday when we get into the next few verses of this book. God bless. See you next time.